I always believed in Clara. For 7 years I saw her as my anchor, my home, my reason to push through the chaos of life. We had our disagreements, everyone does, but I never doubted her loyalty. I never questioned her love, until that night. It started like any other Tuesday. I'd finished work a little earlier than usual, something that rarely happened, and decided to surprise her. Clara loved Italian, so I picked up her favorite pasta from the little place on Elm Street and some flowers, white lilies her favorite. I remember smiling to myself on the drive home, imagining her face when I walked through the door. The moment I stepped inside, something felt wrong. The house was too quiet. Clara always had music playing or the TV on, or at least the faint sound of her humming in the kitchen. But there was nothing, just an oppressive silence that made my stomach tight. Clara. I called out, setting the bag of food on the counter. No response. I walked through the living room, noticing little things that seemed off. Her shoes, the ones she always left by the door, weren't there. The throw blanket she loved to wrap herself in was folded neatly on the couch, untouched. My heart started to race, a gnawing unease building in my chest. When I reached the bedroom door, I hesitated. It was closed, and that was unusual. We never closed the bedroom door unless one of us was sick. I placed my hand on the knob, telling myself I was being paranoid, that she was probably just taking a nap. But deep down, I already knew. I opened the door. For a moment, I couldn't process what I was seeing. It was like my brain refused to connect the dots, as if rejecting the reality in front of me. Clara was there, tangled in the sheets, our sheets, with someone else. A man I'd never seen before. Time seemed to slow down. The sound of blood rushing in my ears drowned out everything else. My hand tightened around the doorknob until my knuckles turned white. I couldn't move, couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. Clara noticed me first. Her eyes widened in shock, her mouth opening as if to say something, but no words came out. The man turned to look at me, his expression a mix of confusion and guilt. "Ethan," Clara's voice was barely a whisper, but it snapped me out of my paralysis. I stepped back, slamming the door shut before she could say another word. My chest felt like it was about to explode. I stumbled down the hallway, my legs shaking, and made it out the front door before I realized I was still holding the lilies. They were crushed in my hand, the petals crumpled and broken. I don't remember getting into the car or starting the engine. The next thing I knew, I was driving aimlessly through the city, the streets blurring past me. My mind raced with 1,000 thoughts, each one more painful than the last. How long has this been going on? Why didn't I see the signs? Was it my fault? Was I not enough? I gripped the steering wheel so tightly that my fingers started to cramp. Anger boiled up inside me, hot and suffocating. But beneath the anger was something far worse, a crushing sense of inadequacy. Clara had betrayed me, and I couldn't understand why. I thought we were happy. I thought she loved me. Eventually, I found myself parked in an empty lot overlooking the city. The skyline stretched out before me, glittering with lights, but it felt distant, unreal. I turned off the engine and sat there in silence, staring at the horizon as tears streamed down my face. I wanted to scream, to punch something, to make the pain go away. But all I could do was sit there, clutching the steering wheel as the weight of what I'd just seen pressed down on me. I didn't go home that night. I couldn't. Instead, I checked into a cheap motel on the edge of town. The room was small and smelled faintly of bleach, but I didn't care. I dropped onto the bed, still fully clothed, and stared at the ceiling, my mind replaying the scene over and over again. Every detail was burned into my memory. The way the sunlight filtered through the curtains, the look of surprise on Clara's face, the stranger in my bed. My bed. I thought about calling someone, a friend, my brother, anyone who could talk me through this, but I couldn't bring myself to do it. How do you even start that conversation? "Hey, my wife just cheated on me. What's new with you?" Instead, I sat in that room, alone with my thoughts as the hours dragged by. At some point, exhaustion took over and I fell into a restless sleep filled with fragmented nightmares. By morning, the shock had given way to something colder, darker. I wasn't sure what I was going to do next, but one thing was certain: my life would never be the same. I woke up to the harsh light streaming through the thin motel curtains. My body felt heavy, my mind clouded. For a brief moment, I forgot where I was. Then it all came crashing back: the betrayal, the scene in the bedroom, the suffocating realization that my life as I knew it was over. I checked my phone. 3 missed calls from Clara. A voicemail. My thumb hovered over the screen, but I couldn't bring myself to listen. Instead, I stared at her name, feeling a mix of anger, heartbreak, and something else I couldn't quite define. Was it pity? No, it was something colder: detachment. But I knew I couldn't avoid her forever. If nothing else, I needed answers. So I mustered what little strength I had and texted her 2 words: "We need to talk." We met later that afternoon at the house, our house. I walked through the front door, my heart pounding, unsure of what to expect. Clara was sitting on the couch, looking smaller than I'd ever seen her. She wasn't wearing any makeup, and her eyes were puffy and red. For a split second, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. "Ethan," she began, her voice shaky. I held up a hand. "Don't. Just don't." She closed her mouth, her lips trembling, and stared at the floor. I sat down in the armchair across from her, leaving as much distance between us as possible. The silence stretched on, thick and suffocating, until I couldn't take it any more. "How long?" I asked, my voice cold and flat. She looked up at me, her eyes pleading. "It wasn't how long," I repeated, my tone sharper this time. "A few months," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. My stomach turned. A few months. That meant this wasn't some fleeting mistake or drunken lapse in judgment. This was deliberate, calculated. I felt my hands clench into fists, my nails digging into my palms. "Why?" The word came out like a growl, filled with all the pain and anger I'd been holding back. She hesitated, as if searching for the right words, and then said, "I don't know, Ethan." "Don't give me that," I snapped, cutting her off. "You do know, people don't just stumble into affairs. You made a choice. So tell me why." Her face crumpled and she started to cry. But her tears didn't move me, not this time. I felt disconnected, she said through her sobs. "You were always working, always distracted. I felt like I didn't matter to you anymore." I stared at her, disbelief washing over me. "So your solution was to sleep with someone else, to betray me. You could have talked to me, Clara. You could have said something. But instead, you decided to destroy everything we built together." "I didn't mean for it to happen," she said weakly. It just did." "That's a lie," I said, my voice steady despite the storm raging inside me. "You knew exactly what you were doing. You didn't care how it would hurt me as long as it made you feel better." She didn't respond. She just sat there, crying softly, as if her tears could somehow wash away her guilt. But they couldn't. Nothing could. I couldn't stay in that house any longer. I grabbed a few essentials: clothes, toiletries, my laptop, and left. Clara tried to stop me, begging me to stay, to talk things through, but I couldn't bear to look at her. Not after what she'd done. For the next few weeks, I lived out of a suitcase, bouncing between motels and the occasional friend's couch. Each day felt like a battle just to get out of bed. I went through the motions at work, barely functioning, and avoided social media altogether. The thought of seeing Clara's face, or worse, his, was more than I could handle. At night, when the world was quiet, my mind would race with thoughts of revenge. I imagined confronting the man she'd slept with, exposing her to our friends and family, or doing something dramatic that would make her regret ever betraying me. But every time, a voice in the back of my mind would stop me. "What's the point?" It would whisper. "She's not worth it." That voice grew louder with each passing day, until finally I started to believe it. One night, after another restless evening spent staring at the ceiling, I realized I couldn't keep living like this. Clara had taken so much from me already: my trust, my peace of mind, my sense of stability. I refused to let her take anything more. It was time to move forward. Not for her, not to spite her, but for myself. I didn't know what that would look like yet, but I knew one thing for certain: I would rebuild my life. Brick by brick, piece by piece, I would create something stronger, something better. And when the day came that I no longer cared about Clara or what she'd done, that would be my real victory. The first step was cutting all ties. I blocked Clara's number, deleted our photos, and moved my things into a small apartment downtown. It wasn't much. A single bedroom with creaky floors and a view of a brick wall, but it was mine. A fresh start, no reminders of her. I spent the first few weeks trying to piece myself together. Therapy became a lifeline. My therapist, Dr. Hayes, was a no-nonsense man who didn't let me wallow. "You're allowed to grieve," he said during our first session, "but don't mistake grief for stagnation. They're not the same." His words stayed with me. At night, when the memories of Clara threatened to drown me, I repeated them like a mantra. I wasn't going to let her define me. Not anymore. One evening, as I sat in my dimly lit apartment scrolling through job boards, something caught my eye. A podcast episode titled "Turning Pain into Purpose." It sounded corny, but I clicked on it anyway. The guest speaker was a man who'd lost everything: his wife, his business, his home, and had rebuilt his life from the ground up. "I used to think revenge would make me feel better," the man said. "But the truth is, the best revenge isn't destruction, it's creation. Build something they can never take away from you." His words hit me like a lightning bolt. I realized I'd been focusing on all the wrong things. Clara didn't deserve my hatred or my energy. If I wanted to heal, I needed to channel that energy into something meaningful. That night, an idea began to take shape. I didn't know exactly what it would look like yet, but I knew I wanted to build something, something that would outlast the pain. Something that would remind me I was more than the sum of my failures. I spent the next few weeks brainstorming. I'd always had a knack for problem solving and a passion for wellness, so I decided to combine the two. My idea was simple: create an online platform that offered affordable mental health resources, from therapy to meditation to community support. But there was one glaring problem. I had no money. I'd saved a little over the years, but it wasn't nearly enough to start a company. The thought of taking out a loan terrified me, but I knew I couldn't let fear hold me back. After endless research and a dozen meetings with financial advisors, I walked into a bank and applied for a loan. $1 million. When the loan was approved, I felt a strange mix of exhilaration and dread. There was no safety net. If this failed, I'd lose everything. But for the first time in months, I felt alive. The next 6 months were a blur of activity. I worked 16-hour days, pouring every ounce of myself into the business. I learned to code so I could build the website myself. I hired a small team, just 3 people who believed in the vision as much as I did. Together, we worked tirelessly to create something we could be proud of. The company, which I named Phoenix Rise, launched quietly at first. I didn't expect much, maybe a few users trickling in. But within weeks, the platform started gaining traction. Word spread through social media, and soon we were featured in a few small online publications. By the 3rd month, we had over 10,000 users. By the 6th, we were growing so fast I could barely keep up. Investors started reaching out, offering funding to expand. For the first time since Clara's betrayal, I felt like I was in control of my life again. But life has a way of throwing curveballs when you least expect them. One evening, after a long day of meetings, I checked my email and saw a name I hadn't thought about in months: Clara. The subject line was simple: "Can we talk?" I stared at the screen, my stomach churning. I thought about ignoring it, deleting it, pretending it never existed. But something in me needed closure. I needed to see her, not for her sake, but for mine. So I replied with a single word: "Okay." We met at a cafe downtown, the same one where we'd gone on our first date. Clara was already there when I arrived, sitting at a corner table with a cup of coffee in front of her. She looked different, tired, almost fragile, but it was hard to feel sympathy after everything she'd done. "Ethan," she said when she saw me, her voice soft, "thank you for meeting me." I didn't respond. I sat down across from her, folding my hands on the table. "What do you want, Clara?" She hesitated, her eyes searching mine. "I wanted to apologize for everything. I know I hurt you, and I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but—" "You're right," I interrupted, my tone cold. "You don't." She flinched, but I didn't care. I wasn't here to make her feel better. "I made a mistake," she continued, her voice trembling, "and I've regretted it every day since. I thought I was doing what was best for me, but all I did was ruin the best thing I ever had." I leaned back in my chair, studying her. For a moment, I considered telling her about Phoenix Rise, about how I'd rebuilt my life without her, but I decided against it. She didn't deserve to know. "What do you want, Clara?" I asked again, my voice sharp. She hesitated, then said, "I want to try again with you." I almost laughed. After everything she'd done, after all the pain she'd caused, she thought I'd take her back. The sheer audacity of it was almost impressive. "No," I said simply, standing up. "You made your choice, Clara. And I made mine." Without another word, I walked out of the cafe, leaving her behind. I didn't look back. As I stepped into the cool evening air, I felt lighter than I had in months. For the first time, I realized I didn't need Clara's apology or her approval. I was free. Walking out of that cafe was the final nail in the coffin of my old life. For months, I'd been carrying around the weight of Clara's betrayal, the sting of her absence, and the phantom pain of what we'd once shared. But as I left her behind, I felt that weight lift. She was no longer a part of my story, just a chapter I had finally closed. Phoenix Rise, on the other hand, was flourishing. By now, it wasn't just a company, it was a movement. Thousands of people from around the world were using the platform to find hope, to rebuild themselves, to rise from their own ashes. 3 months after my final meeting with Clara, Phoenix Rise hit a major milestone: 1 million active users. The growth was staggering, and with it came attention from major investors and media outlets. I was invited to speak at conferences, share my story on podcasts, and even contribute to a book about resilience. But the real turning point came when we secured a $10 million investment from one of the biggest venture capital firms in the country. It was surreal sitting in that boardroom, shaking hands with people who believed in my vision enough to put millions of dollars behind it. I went home that night to my now upgraded apartment, a sleek, modern space with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. For the first time in years, I allowed myself a moment to reflect. I poured a glass of whiskey, stood by the window, and thought about how far I'd come. Clara's betrayal had once felt like the end of everything, but it had been the beginning of something much greater. A few weeks after securing the investment, I was attending a charity gala in the city. It was one of those events filled with champagne, small talk, and people who smiled too much. I wasn't particularly fond of such gatherings, but Phoenix Rise was sponsoring the event, so my attendance was expected. As I made my way through the crowd, exchanging pleasantries and shaking hands, I saw her, Clara. She was standing near the bar, wearing a sleek black dress, her hair styled in soft waves. She looked stunning, but it didn't faze me. Beauty couldn't mask the flaws that ran far deeper. Our eyes met, and for a moment I thought she might look away. But instead she smiled, a hesitant, almost nervous smile, and started walking toward me. "Ethan," she said when she reached me. Her voice was soft, almost timid. "Clara," I replied, keeping my tone neutral. "You look good," she said, glancing at the tailored suit I was wearing. "Thanks." An awkward silence settled between us before she finally spoke again. "I've been following Phoenix Rise. What you've built, it's incredible." I didn't respond immediately. Instead, I sipped my drink, watching her carefully. She looked genuinely impressed, but I couldn't ignore the hint of something else in her eyes: regret. "I'm glad you think so," I said finally. She hesitated, then added, "I'm proud of you, Ethan. I always knew you were capable of great things." I almost laughed at the irony. Where was this faith in me when she was sneaking around behind my back? But I didn't say that. I didn't need to. "Thank you," I said simply. As the night wore on, Clara kept trying to engage me in conversation, but I kept my responses polite and distant. I wasn't angry anymore. She no longer had that power over me. Instead, I felt a quiet satisfaction knowing she could see exactly what she'd lost. Toward the end of the evening, as I was preparing to leave, she approached me one last time. "Ethan," she said, her voice laced with vulnerability, "I know I hurt you and I'll regret it for the rest of my life, but I want you to know. If there's ever a chance to fix things, to start over." I cut her off with a small, almost pitying smile. "Clara, I've already started over, and it's been the best decision I've ever made." Her face fell, and for a moment I saw the pain in her eyes, but it wasn't my pain anymore. It was hers. "Goodbye, Clara," I said, turning and walking away. As I stepped into the cool night air, I felt a sense of closure I hadn't realized I still needed. She'd been the catalyst for my transformation, but she was no longer part of the story. I had risen from the ashes, and I wasn't looking back. Months passed, and I continued to focus solely on the company. The success of Phoenix Rise exceeded even my wildest expectations. What had started as a small idea driven by pain and loss had become a global phenomenon, empowering millions of people to take control of their mental health. We partnered with leading mental health professionals, meditation experts, and wellness influencers to expand our reach. I no longer had to worry about where the next paycheck was coming from or whether I could afford another marketing campaign. The business was self-sustaining, growing exponentially with each passing month. Investors continued to shower us with money, but I was no longer hungry for wealth. The real reward was seeing the change we were creating in the world. But even in the midst of all the success, there were moments when I thought back to the beginning, to the pain, to the betrayal, to the girl who had once meant everything to me. There were days when the memories would creep in uninvited of our late-night conversations, the plans we made, the promises we swore we'd keep. But I had learned to keep moving forward, to turn the page and never look back. One afternoon, as I sat in my office reviewing some reports and getting ready for a video meeting with a potential investor, my phone buzzed. It was an unfamiliar number. I almost ignored it, but something made me answer. "Ethan," a voice said on the other end. I froze for a moment. It was her, Clara. I leaned back in my chair, bracing myself for what was about to come. "Clara," I said, my voice flat, "what do you want?" "I know this is probably the last thing you want to hear from me," she began, "but I need to say something I should have said a long time ago." I didn't respond immediately. Part of me wanted to hang up right then and there, but another part was curious. "I'm listening," I said, though I wasn't sure why I cared. There was a long pause. "I was wrong about everything. I sabotaged the best thing I've ever had. I took you for granted and I thought I could just walk away, but the truth is, I've never been more regretful in my life. I was selfish, Ethan. I hurt you and I know I can never fix that, but I had to apologize. I had to let you know that I've spent these months trying to become a better person. And I don't expect you to forgive me, but I need you to know how sorry I am." I didn't speak right away. Her apology was unexpected, and part of me wanted to just tell her I didn't need it. That I didn't need her to try to right the wrongs she'd done to me. But then another part of me saw something in her voice, something sincere. "I'm sorry, Clara, but you can't undo the past," I finally said, my tone gentle but firm. "And frankly, I've moved on. I don't need your apology anymore. What I needed was for you to never have hurt me in the first place. But I've let that go. I've built something incredible without you, and I'm better for it." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. When she spoke again, it was quieter. "I understand, and I'll never forget what you did. You've done what I could never do, take control of your life, take control of your own future. I was wrong to think that I could come back and make things right. I just wanted to say, I'm happy for you, Ethan, truly." I didn't know how to respond to that, so I simply said, "Goodbye, Clara." I ended the call, not feeling any sense of anger or relief, just a strange calm. It wasn't long after that conversation that Phoenix Rise hit yet another milestone. Our platform was now reaching over 10 million users worldwide. We had expanded into new markets, launched new features, and become a household name in the mental health and wellness space. Investors were calling me for advice. Young entrepreneurs were looking to me as a mentor, and I was finally at peace. The funny thing was, I never sought out revenge. I never needed it. What Clara didn't understand was that my true success wasn't measured in dollars or users. It was in the quiet satisfaction of knowing that I had turned my pain into power. I had taken control of my destiny when I could have chosen to wallow in grief. And in the end, that was the sweetest revenge of all. One evening, as I sat on the rooftop of my penthouse apartment looking out at the city below, I realized something. It wasn't just the success of Phoenix Rise that had made me proud. It was the person I had become. I had faced the darkest chapter of my life and turned it into the foundation for something greater. I had built something that mattered, not just to me, but to thousands of others who needed it. I thought back to Clara, to that painful moment when I found out about her affair. In the beginning, all I wanted was to make her feel the pain I felt. But now, I saw that I had already won. Not because she had failed, but because I had risen, I had overcome. And as I watched the city lights flicker in the distance, I knew that I was no longer the person I was before. I had become someone stronger, someone capable of turning pain into something beautiful. I was no longer defined by the betrayal of the past. I had created my own story, one of success, resilience, and ultimately freedom. The future was mine, and it was brighter than I ever could have imagined.